When I first read the Bitcoin white paper, this was in December of 2010, and if any of you haven't read it, take a read through. It's pretty complicated, it's pretty dense. I had to read it many times to try to fully tease it apart and understand it. But it is a brilliant computer science breakthrough at the fundamental level, and it was kind of handed down to us in this perfectly formed thesis, and we still don't know who did it. That by itself is kind of a bizarre thing. But I guess if you fast forward, or go back even a few more years. So I had studied computer science and economics. I didn't know how those two things might interact in the future, but I was interested in both in college. I had spent a year living in Buenos Aires, Argentina, so I happened to get a sense of what happens to a country when it goes through hyperinflation.
Every time, we produce this chart of all of the previous inflations. At this point in the cycle, you always get a small uptick, which is we're seeing now. Why? Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's generally a year after the peak of the commodity down cycle, and commodities are usually just starting to discount the upcoming cycle. So the commodities at the fast end of the curve, they bring inflation down in the beginning. So they brought it down from 9% down to 3 and a bit percent. Then they pick up because they start rallying a bit. But the slow parts, the massive parts, 70% of all of CPI is rents and wages, and they're starting to deflate.
So in some ways, I think it's terrible for the industry that there's been now several companies that have blown up, and CEOs probably are going to be sentenced here in February. On the other hand, I feel like a real sense of pride that Coinbase stuck to its guns and didn't take any shortcuts, had a long-term view. And I also feel like it's a moment for us to close this chapter, turn the page, if you will, on the Wild West craziness of these offshore unregulated exchanges, so that the many companies that are trying to build in this space legitimately can kind of have a level playing field to compete, and just that's how it should be. So the current state of crypto is, 2022, a lot of things, all growth stocks came, including Coinbase, came down sharply as interest rates went up. And then FTX blowing up had a further deepening of the crypto winter. We had to adjust our cost structure and all kinds of things to exist in that environment. Q2 and Q3, we got back to financial health, EBITDA positive, generated some cash, right-sized the business. And then just in the last 30 or 60 days, we've seen a big run-up in the crypto prices. So now I'm sitting here thinking, okay, maybe this crypto winter is starting to thaw. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but the ETF applications that have been filed, about a dozen of them by the biggest financial institutions in the world, is a huge endorsement. It's going to bring in new pools of capital. The enforcement actions, I think, have actually psychologically allowed people to turn the page and say, okay, justice has been served, the pain has been delivered to the market, and still we can grow from here. And then, next year, I think the move to layer 2 solutions is going to improve the scalability of crypto enormously. I think that's going to be a huge thing, kind of like moving from dial-up to broadband on the internet. I think there's a Bitcoin halvening next year. So my guess is that next year will be pretty positive. The emerging regulatory clarity, 83% of the G20 countries are working on crypto legislation now. So I think all these factors are going to lead to hopefully a good outcome next year for crypto. And we're just, our goal is just to kind of keep our heads down, keep building, try not to get distracted by the noise and the headlines. It's all very sensationalist. And just if we can just build good products for our customers and not do something stupid in the meantime, then I think we're going to be in a very good place.
Right. So at this point, you get this little pickup, and then the big juggernaut carries it lower. If you look at the core inflation numbers, if you look at the 1 month, 3 month, 2 month rates of change, they were all around 2% or less. So what you're seeing is clear, firm evidence that all of this stuff is slowing down. So just be patient. These things take time. But yes, I see nothing but disinflation ahead for probably another year. I would say 10 trillion might be where I'd look it to peak out at. Whether it gets there or not doesn't really matter. But then, so that's a sort of a 10 trillion is a 10x from here, and 3x from the high. The next time around, if it goes from 10 trillion to 50 trillion, is a 5x. It's actually a lot less over time. So It's all doable. The easiest way to start is open a Coinbase account. But then you've got the risk of having an exchange. Now, Coinbase is a very good exchange, or Kraken, or whatever. The next phase is, okay, if you want to self-secure your assets, which I think is a really good thing to do, the right thing to do, you just buy a ledger device. Simple as that. So you execute it on your Coinbase or Kraken or whatever, you transfer it to your ledger, that's it. You know, it's like in the gold world, you could do the same, but you'd have to go and set up a gold storage account, and it's a pain in the ass. This little electronic device costs you very little money, changes your life because you're in control of your assets and nobody can take them from you. When you're engrossed in markets, particularly in bull markets, or even in the really worst parts of bear markets, you tend to get sloppy with your operational security. You kind of leave things on an exchange. You're clicking on a MetaMask because you desperately want to get this NFT, and you click the wrong link. And you really, really have to get your operational security cleaned up as fast as possible, and just think before you act. It's really important. And a lot of the people just did it by mistake because they're rushing to do something, or they get free money on the table. You know, generally there's no such thing as free money. So when you think there is, you're about to be somebody else's lunch. Have your eyes and ears open. Don't be stupid. Assume that everybody's trying to take your money away from your front door on purpose.
Yeah.
Why would you not lock your money away? And I'm not plugging Coinbase for any reason, but except the largest firm in the US. I'm not aware of Coinbase getting hacked in any meaningful way. So the probability of you getting hacked on Coinbase, very low. And so
for now.
For now. So just don't, understand what risks you're taking and don't make it too complicated for yourself. Just choose a safe place to put your money. That's okay to start, as you said.
Get familiar.
Get familiar, and then you can go to the next step. You don't need to do everything all in one go and overcomplicate it either. Taking the steps required to train yourself a little bit better in what you're doing. So it's A, it's fun to do, and B, well worth it.